Welcome to the Practical Enneagram. Cicci Lyckow Bäckman has been offering experiential inner growth courses for almost 20 years. Originally a student of Hudson Riso, the Enneagram has run through Cicci's organism and led her to focus on the very core of the teachings. Two of those are covered in her practical gem of a book, Aspects of You, an exploration of the centres of intelligence and our instinctual drives. Truly, this book has improved my sense and understanding of the function of each centre of intelligence and has clarified, I think, which challenges stem from which centre's lack of development or presence. I purely wanted to speak with Cicci about the centres, but know that her book is equally good on the instincts. There's an amazing resource at the back, a self-scoring of instinctual preferences, which I am actively using now. This is a generous and helpful piece of work, the whole book. Cicci ongoingly offers courses, has a members-only section of her website which is free, and such an excellent Enneagram blog. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's how I found my way to her work. Links to everything in the notes. The couple that we couldn't remember the name of are Kathy Hurley and Theodore Dobson, later Donson, who I believe were the first to name the buried functions for each type in their book, Discover Your Soul Potential. Enjoy this chat with Cicci Lyckow Bäckman. Cicci, welcome. Please can you briefly share with people listening about how you came to offer teachings on inner growth?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for having me. I love being here. And that's an interesting and long story, but I'll try to keep it brief. My background is in language, basically, and translation. Then I got this sort of wake-up call type thing, which was for me that I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and this was in the 90s. Before that, I was interested in psychology with a mental kind of understanding of stuff. And I was, yeah, that's cool, that's interesting. But then when it happened, I sort of just had this feeling that I'm meant to get something here. I better get cracking because I don't know what's going to happen next if I don't, basically. But so what I started doing when I got sick was that and most of this I also did together with my husband, we did lots of body-based, experiential trainings with emotional work and lots of that stuff. So sort of hardcore inner work, which was not focused on the head. So that's where I came from. And when I got into the Enneagram again, which wasn't that much later, because I met it in a context with my disease, and I was meant to be in line with their definitions. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, it's stubbornness. I can identify with stubbornness. Hello. And so that was that. And then when I started looking into the Enneagram more thoroughly, I was like, I'm not sure. I was putting these books together with my husband, and he was like, I'm not sure. And later when I started working with the centers from the Enneagram perspective, because we'd been by then offering inner growth courses or experiential courses for some years really already, I realized this is what we're doing. We're working with the centers. We just didn't do it from the Enneagram perspective. And that's what I'm thinking. I mean, the centers are there. They're even there in our everyday language. We know about these things. We talk about gut feelings, even if we have no idea about inner growth or the Enneagram or any of that. And we talk about wrapping our heads around something, and we talk about having our hearts broken and all that. It's just part of what we are. But it was funny how we realized that we'd sort of structured our courses, the step 1 and step 2 and step 3, and we structured that around the centers. So I think I started looking at the Enneagram basically somewhere in the early 2000s. I sort of just read what I came across. I read Rick Rohr, and I read Karen Webb, and I read, it's the Hobson.
Is it a couple?
Yeah, it's a couple. Yeah. And I changed a letter in the last name, so it's sort of similar, but I'm not sure. Anyway, those, I read them, and I read obviously books by Don and Russ, and I read Palmer Daniels, and so I had some orientation around that. Yeah. As I told you before, I just liked Don and Russ's books because of the symmetry and because of the clarity with which they sort of dealt with piece by piece, and a lot of psychological references. And I was actually thinking I should probably go to a Helen Palmer course on the assumption that if they're good at writing, they're probably not that good in real life. That tends to be the case. And I was registered for a Helen Palmer sort of narrative tradition kind of course in Denmark, I think, which either it was cancelled or I cancelled it for some reason, I can't remember. So I ended up going to Wales and doing part 1 of the Enneagram training with Don and Russ. And I'm so happy that I ended up in there because I realized they could also teach. So so that's where most of my like Enneagram schooling comes from, technically. I was raised as a Catholic, and when I was going as an au pair to London once, a priest was supposed to write me a letter of recommendation, and he said her Catholic conviction is combined with personal ideas. And I think that is something with the Enneagram as well. I mean, my Risto Hudson convictions are combined with personal ideas because that's what happens. But basically, that's my sort of alma mater, if you will.
That all makes so much sense that you were already teaching the centres without the Enneagram, because of aspects of you, the way it's written is it's an exploration of the centres apart from the Enneagram, which is what's so useful and unique about it. So you're not a 9. So what is your type?
I'm an 8.
Right.
I have a 7 wing, and I am leading with the sexual instinct.
Right. Great.
I have a social blind spot, and I can go on.
Okay, great. So our conversation is about balancing the centres, which is not your only area of specialism, I should say, but it is what I wanted us to focus on. So can we say, why do we want to balance our centres? So what's the benefit of doing that?
Well, because the imbalances tend to bite us on the arse at times. You do need to balance the centers in both, in the sense that you need to be a balanced person, which means that each center will be expressed in a balanced way, however much it is expressed at all, but also balancing the centers in the way that they get equal airspace within you. You don't like repress one of them, because as we'll probably get to later on, that those are 2 different things. And so both of those balances is what we're after. Balance within ourselves, which makes how we come across nicer or not so nice, depending, and balance within how we sort of prioritize or listen to these centers.
Because they're sort of reality processing organs as well, aren't they, the centers? Would you agree with that? Yeah. So having unconscious biases in them makes reality a bit skew with, in a way.
Yeah, basically our interface for interacting with the world is how we experience the world. It's a lot of how we experience ourselves as well.
I like that word, interface analogy. Yeah, that seems how it is. So in your book, Aspects of You, you talk about the consciousness of each centre. So how having a home base in one of the centres doesn't really go away, even if we do psychological, spiritual work. Can we say, if possible, some keywords perhaps about the qualities of the personalities with home bases in the gut, heart and head centres?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, obviously, it's going to be individual, because we're not just this. But I'd say that if you're in the instinctual center, you, as in your ego or your self-image or whatever we call that, will be likely identifying with this center that you're living in, basically. And this will bring aspects of it into your focus. So if I'm a gut person, I'm likely to be focusing on things like grounding and boundaries, attraction, repulsion, resistance, plenty of resistance to be found in the gut, and control and presence, and those things which are what the gut is, or the instinctual center is handling for us. How they come out, if it's healthy boundaries or if it's having to control your fiance, then we're talking about balance. So it can look really, really different. Because of this balance thing, one center can come off as either, the good things or the not so good things. But the gut would be about those things. I think the heart people, if we say use that word, it's sloppily, be focusing on emotions. They'll be focusing on relationships, on value, identity, or on the me who, the me as in how I relate. But what is it that is relating? What are the other ones relating to? This me, who am I actually? That would be in some way likely in the focus of the heart types. And again, this can come out in various ways. And the head types, same thing there. They will be about, the head basically has two functions, as I wrote about in the book. So these like information sorting and assessment and understanding and that kind of thing. And it's also this higher function, which is just non-doing and openness and that kind of stuff. So likely normal people, if we call them that, are in the head center, they will be possibly focusing on reasoning, on understanding, wanting to know before doing, on planning, on theories, stuff like that.
Brilliant, thank you. So you were describing there some of the more balanced expressions and unbalanced expressions. Maybe if we can just double click on that and describe each polarity with a little more maybe depth.
And how bad can it get? That kind of
exactly.
Yeah. So okay, if we think about the gut types, and obviously I just need to mention that the triangle, the primary types, are always going to look a little different. It's going to be a little more layered in them. It might be a bit less visible, some of these things, but some of them will be quite visible anyway. It's like a 9, if you talk about a 9 being a gut type, and some 9s will be, I'm just, very sort of floating around the kind of people. But if you see them when they're cleaning their car or doing something practical and they're like rooted into the ground, and then they might not be aware of that, of this scrambling thing that we might come to as well, or compartmentalization actually. But so anyway, if we take the gut people in balance, there will be these healthy boundaries. I'll probably have a good idea what I want, not just an idea literally about what I want, but also I know I will have the wanting. I'll be in touch with my gut, the direction I'd like to take, and saying yes or no to things, getting angry when I need to, not as a defense, but as a this is happening within me. There is a simplicity of being in the gut center when this is balanced. It's going to be immediacy there. I'm going to be engaged with life. There's no filter, so to speak. And if I'm out of balance in the gut center, control, again, will be a nice and trusted friend, and resistance, which is basically just when I have no other means of control, I can just resist. That's the other side of the coin. Might be very territorial. It's like my way, I'm protecting mine. Getting 8ish now, I can hear that. But also this distance and stubbornness can take many forms. It doesn't have to be in the assertive, coming on kind of way. It can be a 1 or a 9 can do it differently, but it's still about protecting what I care about, believe in, whatever it is. That could be good things as well, but if it's out of balance, it's going to take nasty expressions. And for the heart, I'd say compassion is obviously what comes to mind immediately, not least for self. We think about 2s and so compassionate, but a balanced 2, or anyone who has a balanced heart, will have compassion not only for others, but also for themselves, which is a E. But it's not just an ego identification, but it's actually true. There is a knowing, if my heart center is in balance, that I'm being held. It's like I can be an authentic person. I don't have to be defended, go out into the world in a defended way. I can be myself because I know there is something holding me, which also allows me to be emotionally aware. I don't want to defend against some bits of myself that I don't want to be aware of. And I can discern if I have an emotional reaction, I can see whether this is actually relevant in the situation I'm in, or whether this is triggered from, way before, and the situation now is just poking it, basically. So these would be examples of balanced heart qualities, whereas unbalanced heart qualities, not only, but very often these words tend to start with over. It's like I'm over dramatic or I'm over emotional. And so it's like I might be copying these balanced things, because heart is about image as well. So if it's not that balanced, I might be copying balanced heart things. I'm like overdoing my heart skills. I will seek my value in things always not me, but I will like seek my value outside of myself. I will over focus on what's mirrored back to me. So that would be the heart out of balance or not grounded. And that's also interesting that I just said that the heart is not that grounded, because the grounding is obviously about the instinctual center. In one way, I mean, there are so many angles to look at this from. From one angle, they need one another.
Yeah.
You need the gut to find the heart. You need the gut and the heart to find the head. And it's like it has an order to it. And on the other hand, it's all, we can pop in and out of them and have balance depending on our personalities or other things. But anyway, the head center, there the balanced version of being in the head would be about wisdom, about this inner witnessing, this direct knowing, the balanced reasoning, not the argument, but the really seeing what's relevant here and what's not relevant, the ability to be still. When you have these higher open function capabilities or capacities online, then you can do the other stuff, the everyday stuff, the information and the questioning and the reasoning in a more balanced way. So I think a balanced heart center, if it's balanced enough, it tends to include this non-function, this sort of high function, which is more about being alert and available for knowledge, not seeking it actively. But then you might also seek it when you need it. And again, if you're imbalanced, you will do that in a balanced manner. And again, if it's, and also the head will, if I'm in balance, my head will be like moderating, let's say, what comes from the heart and what comes from the gut. Not trying to do it, not trying to do my feelings, or, not theorizing about it, abstracting it, doing it. So the head will be taking in what comes from these other two channels. Usually in our society, in our lives, it's going to be the head deciding what we'll actually do.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have gut reactions that will take over, but that's very rare. Usually we have a choice. The head will know to listen to those and still make a reasonable or a sensible choice. Because if I'm out of balance in the head, there's going to be confusion, possibly going to be arguing, because I want to not have the confusion. So I try to cling to simplistic things and descriptions of stuff. I'll be possibly suspicious. I might have spinning thoughts. I might be second guessing myself, worrying, being anxious, trying to figure out everything. Do you want to stay with your partner? Do you still love your partner? Let me think. No, that's how you do that. But it's like when the head is running the show, that's when it's not in balance. Often quite some dissociation is going on, like a ban on instincts. I don't want to be connected to that stuff, not just the ones, but all of us. If the head is really unbalanced, that can be one way that shows that I'm managing from here, thank you very much. And the heart and the gut is like, not trustworthy or something.
I just want to highlight a point you made about these building on one another. There's a teaching in the way that you sequence these: gut first, then heart, then head.
It depends on what you're talking about. On the one hand, if you want to enter into knowledge work, if you want to enter into experiential work, for some people, it works best entering it from the heart. Some people prefer to go to a cognitive therapist first, figure things out. And then so we can have different points of entry. That's one angle, one perspective, one truth, because it's true. But on the other hand, you will need roots. You can't say, oh, this flower will grow with the petals first. That doesn't happen. So you'll need the roots, and you'll need the heart, and then what comes out as a balanced head function head functions can be balanced in another way, because there is this access to the other two. I'm an 8, my husband's a 1. I think that had something to do with how we structured our courses. And we did it. We wanted it to be body-based. We wanted it to be, you need to be in touch with your body. And I mean, even if you're an 8, and it's like these people, they're outwardly directed, gut-centered people. What's, how are they not connected to their bodies? Like, I can use my body. I can abuse it possibly, and I can sort of, do lots of stuff with it, but it doesn't mean I'm listening to it. And again, we can over-identify with the center without necessarily it being very balanced.
Yeah. In fact, isn't that likely, Cicci? The home-based center is the one where there's the most distortion, for want of a better word.
It definitely is in the way how our personalities are structured. The whole thing with the personality is you F up your home-based center. That's the identification of the ego that stays the longest, no matter how far you go upwards in the levels and how far developed you get. You're going to have issues with your own home center. But it's also true that whichever type you're working with, if they're in a spin, heart spin, territorial spin, head spin, whatever, you can say, close your eyes, feel your feet. That's how you get to presence. You can't be present without body to be present in. Yeah. So in that sense, it's the starting point for everybody, regardless of the type we are and what our preferences look like.
That makes sense completely. Yeah. I wanted to draw you on, because I found it so helpful in the book, the distinctions you make between the heart center and the social instinct, or the adaptation instinct, as you prefer to name it. That probably is a misconception that happens a lot, or a misattribution. So can you say a little bit about that distinction?
Yeah. First, I'd just say that the problem is that all these distinctions and descriptions, they're schematic. I mean, we're doing them to illustrate things that are true, yes, but also that we can then watch in ourselves or others, and we can never isolate them in ourselves or others. So we can isolate them on paper, and it makes sense. And is not a made-up isolation in a way, or distinction. But still, we can never go around, today I'm just going to act from my social adaptation and not from my heart. We can't do that. We're not capable of doing that as people. So just that said, as I see it and experience it, would be that the me who that I mentioned before, the realization that I'm a person, this whole mirroring kind of thing is not there in the instinctual expression, in the social instinct or the adaptation instinct or whatever we call it. It's about knowing my place in a group, relating to somebody, if it's one person or several people, doesn't matter, but relating to people, reading facial expressions, knowing, it's like, how can I interact to set it apart from the other two instincts? It's about knowing that there is a you, and the you has equal rights to their feelings and experiences or whatever, and in fact has feelings and experiences of their own, which they're another me. And that kind of thing is there in the social instinct versus the other two, where it's not there. So that's the other instinct, as it were, or the we instinct. But still, the we instinct does not necessitate for me to reflect on myself. It doesn't. Who am I? This narcissistic in the clinical sense, not the bad sense, but the realization that the me has a shape and a form, and it's like, who is this? And like, it's another dimension of awareness of me that's there in the heart. I don't know. I think that this is getting unclear and confusing.
I think it's great, actually. No, it's clear, and it's very clear in your book, so people can read that if they want to. The good point, it's a good point, important point, isn't it, that you made, that a lot of these categorizations are a bit artificial. In reality, things arise in constellation, right?
Yeah.
What's the difference between a center being out of balance and being underdeveloped?
First of all, when I talked about an underdeveloped center, I don't know if I used blind in the book, but that sometimes happens too, because I use blind with the instinct. So sometimes I don't want to. But it's like the same thing for the secondary types. It's like the same thing, that we have this center usually that the ego hasn't that much interest in it. It hasn't incorporated. It's what for? What we use that for? If I'm an 8 and it's like the heart center, it's going to take. If my focus or the focus of my ego personality is to stay in control of my environment and whatever happens, then I can't. Feelings will just muck that up. They will just, get in the way. If I start seeing people for what they were and understand, so the heart center is going to be not so useful to the ego or downright damaging to the ego, actually. So that would be an underdeveloped center. Having said that, I will also just say that individual sort of mini blindnesses can be all over. Any type can be sort of partly blind for something to something, but they've just sort of encapsulated something and put it aside in any of the centers for whatever reason, childhood experience, whatever. So we just need to see that there is always lots of individual variation here. But basically, an underdeveloped center or a sort of blind center is going to be one where I haven't, or the ego hasn't seen much value. Whereas an imbalanced center, usually the ego's seen lots of value there. That's why it's imbalanced. It's going to be imbalanced to the extent that I'm imbalanced. Because I cannot be a semi-balanced human being having a perfectly balanced heart. That's not happening. How would that happen?
No.
It's not possible. So that's my personal balance is going to decide how balanced my centers are in each of one of them. But then my underdeveloped center might make them in not balanced, in regard. I think briefly you could say that ego identification affects balance. Wherever the ego is not so interested, it's going to be a bit less developed because, to be frank, the ego is the one developing most of this stuff.
Yeah. And then the Enneagram maps this, doesn't it? So it has the 8s, the 3s, and the 7s with an underdeveloped heart center.
Yeah, I think that was the
couple, right?
And as far as the 3 is concerned, the 3 is concerned. You said the 8, the 7, and the 3, and if you look at the Hornevian groups, obviously those are the ones, assertive types having a bit of an issue with heart stuff. And having said that, the 3 is in the heart center. Together with the 6 and the 9, they have this a little bit different situation. Usually that would mean more mini blindnesses, more confusion, since the center I'm over-identifying with and the center I'm trying not to, have to do it, that's my own home, the same center.
This is a great segue to my next question, which was going to be about the sort of unique work that 9s, 3s, and 6s are doing when it comes to balancing the centers, because they're a bit special on the Enneagram when it comes to that work. Is that accurate to say that, Cicci?
Yeah, they're usually very special on the Enneagram, actually. So much of the Enneagram will spring from these 3 types. The centers, it's one in each center. Hornevian groups, one in each, so the 3 is like the center of the assertive Hornevian group, and a bit set apart from the other 2, etc. So this happens all the time, that they have a little bit of an tilt to how we can view these things. And the thing is, we love specific recipes, don't we? We love. You have an underdeveloped. Yeah, you have 4, are you?
Yeah.
So you would have, with this schematic view, you would have an underdeveloped or a bit of a blind gut center or an instinctual center. Do these exercises and you'll be dandy, that kind of thing.
That would be great.
But it doesn't work. We need to get to know ourselves. And if we hate that phrase because we grew up in the 70s and 80s, we can say that we need to increase our self-awareness. Sounds not, but it's the same. And that's going to be the case whichever type we are. The secondary types, you can give them a hint that, look at this one. That's probably going to be interesting for you. And something you resist because what's for, but you're going to find something value there. You're going to find something in the gut center that is, why would I even do this? I'm a 4, come on. What do I, and that's the key. And for me, same with the heart. For the 1, same with the head. Imagine a 2, and you say, you might want to sit in silent meditation Who's going to say why? What's the point? And so we have this hint, the secondary types. The primary types, the hint is a bit more in your face, because it's like, well, you're going to have to not isolate your core center. It's a much more confusing and complicated task. It's the same with the instincts, looking at the blindness that we have, identifying where bits I haven't seen. That's always a very nice way in, because the ego hasn't been pissing all over. It's not that tainted yet. Yeah. And almost literally. So there's lots of fresh ground, as it were, that we might be resistant to look at. We just have the resistance to contest with.
Only the resistance. Yeah.
And with the primary types, it's a bit more than that. It's not resistance, it's confusion, and that's much more hard to handle. So the primary types, just like the rest of us, I mean, we will all have to look at, what have I done today that I didn't feel altogether comfortable about? What happened today that I didn't feel comfortable about? Start there. You did something, they did something, something happened, whatever. Just go there. You'll find whatever you need to be working on, because this is just increased self-knowledge and being real with yourself about what's going on within you. And that will take you to the places you need to uncover, regardless of which type you are. However, this is a very boring and unsexy.
Yeah.
You see why I have a hard time packaging my courses. So we can formulate nice and tidy instructions. And I do that as well, because it helps people, because they can't really figure out how do you go and sit with yourself. So there's all kinds of exercises and stuff, which is good. The instruction won't be different for the secondary types and the primary types. The way will be more overgrown, and the path will be more overgrown and like more confusing for the primary types. But also, as Donald Russ liked to put it before, at least, they said that the secondary types had a evolutionary speed, whereas the primary types had a revolutionary speed. That is like a catch-up thing, because you do this stuff, and then suddenly the 9 just says, "Oh God, look! There is this power here. I can think at the same time and feel stuff, and it's like to get." And so we can experience, if we're primary types, more sudden realizations.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that before about the revolutionary and evolutionary, but it was a selfish question, really, because in my coaching practice, I always end up with the primary type. The confusion doesn't just stop with them. I get confused about how to support people. That would probably happen with any type that I work with, but it can be difficult to figure out what's going on with primary types.
I think one way to go about that would be to address this scrambling or this compartmentalization. And to do that, there is this, Don and Russ called it, that there like 2 modes of existing for these 3 types. And for the 3s, it'll be that either I'm in my feeling center and I'm experiencing my feelings, or I'm in a productivity mode and I think and strategize and do, and that's the part in the head and the gut, basically. And if I'm a 6, I'm going to be either in a sort of duty mode, where I'm feeling stuff and doing stuff from what I believe in, or I'm going to be in a thinking mode, where I can either just actually be, or I can question everything. It's going to be like a bit of a wall between them. And for the 9, same thing. I can be either in my body and in my instinctual functioning, or I can be in this daydreaming mode where I feel and think and not much happens, because, so if you can get ourselves, the primary types, talk from their perspective, if the primary type, I can see this, how this happens, or just acknowledge that this happens. And usually I'm going to have to acknowledge that it happened yesterday, because it's very hard to see it in the real, in real time, because it takes, but then like all the inner work things, we start with yesterday or last year or whatever, and we do it in retrospect, and then we get closer and closer to the actual thing. And one day they're still sitting there daydreaming and like, whoa, I haven't felt my feet in an hour, whatever it is. And so we sort of try to just close the gap between 2 states of functioning.
Oh, I love how you just put that. It's making me think of that catch yourself in the act expression, which I'm not actually that much of a fan of. But it is like that, isn't it? We catch ourselves in the act of doing what we...
I can see what you mean with catching yourself in the act. And whatever expressions nurture this idea that it's about warfare. I'm going to manage myself, and I just try to eradicate those as much as I can, because that's not going to get us there. It's like the sun and the wind competing who can get the man to take the coat off first. It's like, it's not going to work. You need to be kind to yourself doing this. And it's like, no, I'm just going to whip myself over this for a couple of more years and then I'm going to be finished. No, you're not. You won't afford being present to whatever you judge if you're judging it. You need to just see that this is happening. So for me, catching yourself in the act is a phrase. I haven't thought of it before, so thank you for mentioning it. I'm not using it either, actually. But it's not what it's about. It's noticing what is happening in the moment. And as long as you judge or, demand change or whatever it is, and you try to make you bend to your will, that's not going to make all of you available to you. Because all of you will be scared to show itself, obviously, because you're judging it.
Yeah, it's a pretty sort of insidious thing, that whole demonizing yourself.
With the best intentions.
Yeah.
Whip doesn't really work.
If it did, I'm sure we'd all be a lot more evolved than we are. I love the idea at the centre that is not claimed for ego expression, which you talk about in the book, is the gift one. I suppose I like the idea that my gut centre has these sort of secret powers. Can you share about how this looks practically, if that's even a possibility?
Yeah, can we use you?
Yeah, sure.
Because I imagine as a 4 that you will go into emotional things now and again. I'm guessing when this happens, the thoughts are also happening. And the thoughts ostensibly are there to make sense of your emotions or of whatever happened. But the thoughts are really there to keep this whole spiral going, because that's me, after all. I mean, that's how we're wired. If somebody were to tell you, just, while all this is happening, can you feel your feet? Can you feel your hands on your thighs or whatever, can you feel the warmth of your tea that you're drinking? Just whichever sensory impressions are at hand, and not as a way of, forget the emotions and go feel your thigh or, whatever part of the body you're feeling. It's not that. It's just do them both. Just remind yourself that there is a physical organism here. I mean, the whole thing with identification is to see if we can step just a little bit back from the identification or that which we identify with, so we can start getting a first-hand experience that this is actually not me. And if I'm an 8 and I'm in this average level strategizing kind of doing thing where I need to figure stuff out so I can do this right and I can squash the resistance or whatever I'm trying to do, if somebody said to me, how does this feel when you're doing this? Do you feel kind? I'd probably punch them in the face, depending on where I am at this level. But just as you would go, you're not understanding me. Feet, what feet? It's like, so we have all this, we do resist it. So, I mean, obviously, people have to be available to this suggestion. But that would keep doing your thing with the emotions, keep doing your strategy and crushing the opponent or whatever. But see if you can be aware of the third center that is in it and is affected by this. And get curious about how this is being affected. And this curiosity is our closest friend, because you cannot be curious and judging at the same time. It's not going to happen. I feel so upset. Where? So that's how we can use this third. But so the 1, 2, and 6, and the 6 again will be a bit different. But for everybody, regardless of type, again, feel your body. That's going to work. What are the emotions that are involved? Does this remind you of an earlier situation? Blah, 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 that kind of thing. But apart from that, we can help 1s and 2s specifically by asking them to just breathe for a moment and just be aware of finding something that's still, or something that's the same within you within me, when I'm in this state, and before last night when I was cooking dinner. Or, this morning when I went out of bed, what is the same? Which aspects of me can I identify as more permanent And that would be like the head center version. And obviously we would have to place this bar at whatever height our client, whatever, can or can process. So we have
to be scaled.
But it's always going to be about stopping spiral of energy that's going on. As a 4, you'll be over-identified with your emotional center, just as we all tend to over-identify with our home base. And as a 4, you will also tend to believe that I'm very emotionally aware because I'm a 4. You know, I have access to my feelings. And it's like, yeah, but there are feelings and then there are feelings. And, you know, there is grounding and then there is grounding. So we all have that. We're a bit at home, for better or worse, in our home center. But also we need to get to the more like core aspects of it, because our usually running around in the mid-range.
A more honest part of it, maybe. Yeah. So that coming to the end of our time, and I've really loved sitting with you and hearing from you directly. What are you doing now, Cicci? So I think you told me when we last spoke that you had been offering a levels of development course.
And that's going on.
It's still going on.
Yeah. And then I'm going to start another. I've had like the sort of introduction, and I'm not forcing these levels people to have done the other, but I have had understanding the instincts as my entry thing, which is a bit backwards because you'd think you want to know the centers first. But the thing is, before you really get what the instincts are about, the whole instinctual center will just be this placeholder gray area that you have when you talk about the centers. So I have an understanding the instincts course, and it's starting on, if 24th of April is a Sunday, it's starting on 20th. And then I offer sessions. I'm writing a new book. And also I think in the autumn after the summer break, I'm going to have another centers, going deeper with the centers course.
These are live element too.
Yeah. I'm very drawn to the interacting formats because I find that they are more rewarding to work with. It's more interesting for me to have people there than to just talk to the screen. Yeah. So far, I'm sticking to
live format. Yeah.
Live format. And obviously, if people can't attend, I'm also recording it so you can catch up. I'm considering doing that as well, but I haven't so far packaged like courses that you can just buy and do in your own time.
No, that would be great to have that available as well. And can I have a little glimpse of what the book you're writing on is about?
It's about something I call Enneagramma, or Enneagramma proficiency. I find myself gravitating towards these aspects of the Enneagram, which are not types. I'd say the types don't matter. They matter hugely. I mean, they're the base of the whole thing. But I like to work with the instincts. I like to work with the centers. I like to work with the levels of development. I like to do this because it's like if I go to a different country and I just want to order beer and go to the bathroom, it's fine to learn phrases. But if I want to learn the language, learning phrases is just so inefficient. The thing with the Enneagram, we say, oh, I'm this and that type. So I look at all these lists of stuff and telling me about myself. And I'm trying to figure out what a center is from there. No, that's the wrong direction. You need to find these things and then see how you as you type and as the person that you are and your background, whatever, how you fit into this. So that's why I call it grammar, because I think it's about learning the bits. So it's going to be looking at a bit at the centers, but not as much because it's an aspect. So I'll refer to that. But a bit of how the levels work, not each level, but how the dynamics of these things work.
I much like what you've just said and look forward to reading that. Next guest is Mario Sikora. We'll be talking about the Enneagram and the connecting points. That's going to be really good, I think. Back again in 2 weeks.